the apostles were rebuked?
Yeah, for wanting to call fire down on the Samaritans.
Yeah, fire bad. I just...
Fire bad. What are you, the Bride of Frankenstein?
Yes.
Fire bad.
Yeah. Grammatically, what is fire bad? How does that work?
Well, in my
It's
mind.
in monster speak.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Plain Truth, a Holy Spirited podcast. I'm Maggie Ulmer, and I am here with...
David Watson.
Sky Kisker.
And our special guest today.
Justus Hunter.
And we do have a guest host. He's Jeremiah, Scott's godson, who's visiting Scott. Please introduce yourself.
Hi there, I'm Jeremiah Ramsey, and I'm visiting from north of Seattle, Washington.
Woohoo! North of Seattle, Washington. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
Today we're going to talk about why does it matter what we believe? Or does it even matter what we believe? And we've got a few different items of conversation. Justus is here with us because he is working on a catechesis.
That's something like that. That's
A
right.
confirmation
A confirmation book. Yeah.
book to be used
Just a lot
in
of
Methodist
catechetical.
congregations to help young people
Learn the faith.
learn the faith.
Yeah, I think the idea is, of confirmation as I think about it is, you've been living in this world all your childhood, and now we want to kind of draw the curtains back and explain why you've been doing all those things. And that's what we're trying to do.
Nice. So in the Methodist Church, confirmation is something that most kids go through when they're about, 7th, 8th grade?
6th, 7th, 8th, yeah, anywhere in middle school.
I was delayed. I was a freshman in high school.
Well, you know.
You were advanced.
For in age, yeah. Compared to everybody else, I sure was.
You got more out of it. It's all good.
Yeah.
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 So you're writing this catechism. You're writing confirmation material, basically, right?
That's right.
Justus?
That's right.
And you're working on this for Seedbed?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
I think the tentative title is Absolute Basics of the Wesleyan Way. And they've already put out Absolute Basics of the Christian Faith that my friend Phil Talon did. And so Phil and I are working on this book together on Wesleyan distinctives.
So this is like you would, for kids who are being catechized in the United Methodist Church,
Right.
you would first use book 1, which
Right.
is making sure you're actually a Christian.
Yeah, you'll learn about the Trinity and,
And then book 2 is here's some Wesleyan distinctives
Right.
if you want to.
we'll tell the story of Wesley. We'll talk about the way of salvation and then how we do baptism and that type of stuff. All the basics. That's why we call it the absolute basics.
Yeah.
The absolute basics. Well, it seems to me that we get the basics wrong a lot. There's a lot of silence after that. So
What do you mean?
I just
What
mean.
do you mean?
I mean, I think I'm glad that you're writing this book. I'm just thinking back to some of my own experiences, either observing confirmation, not my husband's, because he's listening and he's taught confirmation, but, where there's sort of, I think sometimes an emphasis on trying to get young people engaged and the effort put into engaging young people
Yeah.
sort of drives the course off.
Yeah, I
or-
think you have to be really confident in that the mysteries of faith are just intellectually alluring, and you just sort of have to present them as clearly and elegantly as you can. And I think that the first book Phil kind of shows, when I read it, at least, and the kids I read it with, that the mysteries of faith...
Two of them were mine,
Two
right?
of them were yours, that's right.
Yeah.
The mysteries of faith, they're quite interesting conceptually, and they're interesting ideas, and kids can access them and think about them and ponder them, and engaging their intellectual enthusiasm is quite easy if you just present them clearly.
So I was once in it, and okay, so let me start off by saying, if anyone listening has done this, I'm not picking on you by talking about this. Now that that's out of the way.
We're all really interested about
we're
what's
intrigued.
I was
about to
once
happen.
in a church where they had the confirmation class members write their own creed.
Oh yeah, I had to do that.
And I was thinking, Now, in Scott's confirmation class, they probably just made health food shakes, right?
I don't remember a whole lot from my college. I do remember learning that John Wesley was rescued from a fire, and that was why he decided God had selected him.
And then after he got rescued, he went and had a health food shake.
I just remember thinking that is the dumbest thing I have ever heard in my entire life. And it's actually not the story. It doesn't even really.
Well, now I need to go edit my first chapter.
But as I was sitting there, I was thinking, why in the world would you do that? Why would you have kids write their own creed when there's already a couple of perfectly good creeds that the church has honored for centuries?
Which are canonically determined to be correct ways of speaking about the divine.
Right. And
Why would you encourage someone who doesn't know what the correct way of speaking about the divine is to just write their own?
Well, I mean, that implies that everybody agrees that there's a correct way to speak about the divine.
I'm not saying there's a correct way. I'm saying we have said that these things are correct.
I agree with you.
So it's a canon, a measuring stick to judge whether it's accurate ways of speaking about the divine. Doesn't mean that that's the only way to say anything about God. But
I agree with you. I'm just saying is that if you don't recognize that, then you're going to say, hey, you know what? It's all right, 14-year-old. You can write your own.
Good luck figuring out the hypostatic union.
Now you have to explain that, David.
The hypostatic union is just an example of how Christ can have two natures at one time.
Human and divine.
Right, human and divine.
fully, both.
Yes, fully,
Simultaneously.
both. But I couldn't figure out why we were doing that rather than teaching them real creeds.
Yeah.
And what the creeds mean.
Yeah, and what they mean.
Like, what is a hypostatic union, for example? And why is it important? And why should I care?
This seems totally backwards because the whole idea, I think, of confirmation is there is an integrated, coherent set of practices and beliefs that theoretically these students should experience. They should be going to communion, listening to sermons, singing songs, having these other experiences, watching baptisms, and then they should also be exposed to these creeds. And they all hold together. They should all hang together. Really, all you're doing in confirmation is trying to say, this is how all of that fits together, so that then you can experience them more deeply. So who cares what they think?
Well, that would mean that the answer to this is it doesn't matter what you believe.
No, it matters what you should believe, and that's the point of confirmation.
But doesn't it matter what they actually believe? I mean,
Well-
if they want, and so why are we telling them what they should believe if it doesn't matter what they actually believe?
Well, look. I have kids. They're not teenagers yet. They believe all sorts of interesting things.
God bless you.
Yeah, I know. And I'm happy to entertain all of their interesting ideas, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure that whatever bizarre imaginary world they live in, 80% of the time, is unlikely to form them into truly, deeply happy people in the way that belief in the Trinity, the Christ to whom they are united in communion and in the body and through baptism will. So I want to reshape them in that way, and then they
So
can
the
have
aliens
all the
they're destroying in a bloodbath on the screen is
That's
not
right.
going to
That's
actually
right.
form them into the kind
right.
of people who will
Well, I'm not going to bet the farm on that one. Yeah.
live for the resurrection. Whereas knowing about
seems
the
unlikely.
resurrection might actually have that.
It
end
seems
effect.
unlikely to me. It seems unlikely to me. You can try it if you like, but I'm going to go for something built on substance and revelation.
Jesus.
But here's the thing.
Tell us the thing, David.
I was going to tell you what the thing is. Our United Methodist tradition is rooted in doctrinal pluralism.
Absolutely.
We were formed.
Right, but
We were formed to be doctrinal pluralists in 1970.
I do think we have to clarify
Yes.
that Methodism is not rooted in
Right.
doctrinal pluralism.
Methodism is not.
The incarnation of Methodism that emerged in 1968
in 72.
and 72 had this vision of it being the center of all ecumenical union, and so put that in as its part of its foundation.
It's a bit ambitious, don't you think?
It was just plain silly, actually. But
There you go, people.
In
Just plain
retrospect.
silly.
But so, we wrote a statement of doctrinal pluralism into our book of discipline, and that's who we were until 1988 when we changed that. And then I think probably this recent Judicial Council decision has changed us back.
Well, that's true, but let's keep talking about catechism. So,
weren't you the guy who wanted to avoid?
I've heard that there is a really good
Blog
United-
post?
MG.
I heard that there is a really good Methodist catechesis book out there right now available from Abingdon Press.
Abingdon.
Yeah, have you heard about it? It's called Key United Methodist Beliefs.
That is an amazing title.
Oh, let me tell you something.
This just went off the
I
rails.
was so thrilled. I was thrilled when they came up with that title. I was like, yes, I've always wanted to write a book with a
know what?
title that interesting.
Yeah, 15 minutes
That's not
before
bad.
the product placement happened.
Yeah. I mean, I like it that we went from talking about your book to David's book. But
And I'm glad you mentioned Seedbed, because they did publish my book, Scripture and Electric.
what is going on right now? All right.
David Lowe's Watson, is that?
Oh, no, you didn't.
Okay.
Didn't.
It seems to me
Oh,
that
Maggie's
there's
gotta bring
an
it back.
underlying issue of culture that competes with catechesis, either competes or supports, depending on the nature of the culture. So, one of the things that was my experience was, that confirmation and really church happened in a vacuum. I went on Sundays, I did my confirmation class. That was the entirety of my existence in church as a young person. My family, God bless them, lovely, wonderful people, but, we were not all on the same...
Jesus page.
Yeah. And so, when you have an environment of variation of belief, then, as David was saying, when you have pluralism, problems can arise.
Well, and I think, 1968, the whole idea that, this is about me finding myself, my self-expression, all of that is going into this, theological pluralism.
Free to be you and me,
Self-actualization.
Marlo Thomas.
Spirit of the age.
Yeah, so it's the spirit of the age.
It was interesting that David wrote a book, really a kind of catechetical book, I think more oriented towards adults, your book.
Yeah.
Which we're both tapping into, we're trying to feed a similar need we perceive.
don't think-
Why did you write that book?
Well, first of all, I don't think Billy Abraham and I would collaborate well on a children's book.
yeah, I think that's probably right.
But secondly, I think we did it because our own experience working in local churches indicated that people didn't know the basics of the faith. And once when I was serving at church, a woman came up to me and in Sunday school and was like, why can't Methodists be the people who believe whatever they want? And I was like, well, I guess we can be that, but we shouldn't be that. There's already a group of people who do that. They're called
Unitarians.
Right.
And secondly, because we have a heritage
Yeah.
of belief. And thirdly, because we actually believe that there are certain ideas and there are certain revealed truths that help lead us closer to God. And so by learning about the truths of the faith, we enter more fully into the divine life.
I mean, which is simply to say, you can't believe whatever you want to believe because some of what you believe is not true. And you're just creating a fantasy world in which you are the center of your own universe. Whereas God has revealed himself in order to be known so that you can have a relationship and actually experience what it means to be human.
Which is why Wesley needed Aquinas. Otherwise,
Amen.
He wouldn't really have language to articulate that, would he?
He would just have the quadrilateral.
Yeah. It would be a bummer.
We are misleading people with this
he invented.
podcast.
Why are we
In Bristol
people?
in 1742.
The Wesleyan quadrilateral was invented for 1968.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that.
I've
that-
heard they have an original copy of Wesley's quadrilateral.
People don't
signed by
even know what the
Wesley
quadrilateral is.
on
Okay.
parchment
So
in
first of all,
the archives
my
at
point.
Drew.
My point was not about the quadrilateral.
Again,
it was
fantasy belief that doesn't actually have any basis in reality.
had more to do with the nature of how Aquinas discusses existence and reality, and that is a language that the church has historically, been able to benefit from.
This was supposed to be a fight between Scott and I, and now it's going to be just a Maggie Scott fight. I'm actually really pleased with that turn.
I think there is still plenty of room for a fight between you and Scott because my Aquinas information is about to run out. That well is real shallow.
Here's the thing. So we all just assume it matters a lot if we believe Reese's Cups are the best thing to eat 5 times a day or not. Okay, that belief is obviously important to us, right? So why would we not think it matters whether or not this man is God?
Right. So why do we make nutrition a matter of importance and we make doctrine a matter of mere opinion?
Of actual eternal nutrition.
Right. I mean, it's a matter of. I really think it's a matter of being confident, but also one has to have experienced the attraction of the teachings of the faith and have discovered them salvific in a certain sense. I know when I sit and read theology, it can be rather abstract sometimes, but I find myself praying more fervently, and then I find myself submitting to the callings God has placed on my life. I become a better father usually. Those are just fringe benefits of the intimacy I have deeper and deeper with God. And so...
And we could say that in order to have intimacy with God, you need to know who the God is with whom you have intimacy. And you need to know what that God has done on your behalf in order that you may more perfectly love that same God and worthily magnify that same God.
So Joshua, my youngest son, came in the other day from school and he said, "Mom, did you know that our DNA is 90% the same as a banana?" And I have no idea as to the veracity of that statement, but I think that
I've heard we're descended from bananas.
bananas, yeah. This morning, my
Mushy on
husband
the
and I were
inside.
sitting around having coffee, and we were talking about G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy. And
Such a good book.
it is a good book. He has this moment where he discusses the nature of the why versus the how. That will discuss something like, you'll say, well, how do you know that a chicken is going to come from an egg? Because if you look at an egg, you don't think, oh, chicken. And scientists, empiricists will, work backwards from the chicken, and they'll use DNA and genetics and cellular development, and then they'll point to that and they'll say that's the why. But that's not the why, that's the how.
Yeah, it's a description.
Nobody knows why. And so he says this interesting thing where he says, why would I question the rule that made G.K. Chesterton exist? I have no idea why that happened, but it's amazing that it happened. And I often think that there's an element of, surrender. And it made me honestly think of absurdity, Scott Kierkegaard, and made me think of that we spend a lot of time emphasizing the fact that we can deconstruct things and find out how they work, but we never take a moment to stand back and say, oh my gosh, it works. And why? We have no answer for that. That is God.
Yeah. I remember, this is going to sound lame probably because I was, a freshman in college in biology class, and I just remember having a description of how, 2 cells suddenly become a human being. And it was delivered as if that was an explanation.
Right.
And I just remember thinking, in my like that's a description. It's not an explanation. A description is not an explanation. It's simply a description. That is crazy that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think GK, he says something like, why would I, it's absurdity that we would have such a problem with the rule when we didn't make the rule. Like, we didn't.
The very fact that you can question the rule.
Yeah, it didn't originate from us. What does it say? I did not make it. It is making me.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is part of what I was thinking about before. The idea of what revelation is God undressing in front of us. I mean, it is God. I mean, the intimacy. I'm sorry. The intimacy is going from one. Yeah, I was trying to think of a nicer way to say it, or less weird.
Naked.
Yeah, but God is revealing Himself to us in order that we might have relationship, because we are terrified and afraid and will not reveal ourselves to God. And what you have in the doctrines of the church is you have the community saying, this is what we have experienced of God's self-giving, self-revelation of this is who God is. Right. And how we can talk about that, because this is the person that we can actually have a relationship with that will transform who we are and tells us that there is something going on in our world beyond what we can see, hear, taste, and touch, and smell, and whatever other senses there are.
So there are a couple of objections someone might advance against being so hung up on beliefs. What does it matter? One was the one I was thinking about earlier, which is kind of, well, beliefs and practices are two different things, and let's just do the right things and be good people, and don't get too hung up about the beliefs. Doctrine divides. Something else unites. I don't
Ministry.
I don't care enough about the other stuff, evidently. But anyway, that's one objection, right? And so you don't live your life in any other area according to that assumption. So that's ridiculous. The other one though would be this sort of, are we sort of trying to control or contain God in our revelation? And isn't that a problem with getting too fixated with belief? But I think Scott, we were saying sort of, look, God comes to us in the person. The second person of the Trinity comes to us, puts on flesh, and presents teaching to us. And it turns out that teaching actually is quite difficult to grapple with. That's why we talk about these as mysteries, and why you can write books about them, explaining them in a lot of different ways, probably endlessly, and pondering them, because those mysteries. Yeah, that's right. But also, I think it shows you that these mysteries are designed to draw our minds toward God. We kind of keep pondering them over and over and dig deeper and deeper into them. It's not a control thing. If anything's being controlled, it's us being controlled by the mysteries. Our minds are being reshaped by them.
Right, because we're not controlling or putting God in a box if this is what God has revealed to us, right? If God is the revealer, rather than being something that we come up with, this is divine action, not human action, that's controlling the way in which we think about God. And maybe God actually wants us to think about God in a very particular way, not just in any way.
Well, and I think I want to just touch on one thing that you were saying. So the fact that God reveals us in ways that our minds cannot actually fully comprehend is actually reshaping us in our piety, in relationship to God, in a way that is humble. There's a ways in which even the very incomprehensibility about what has been revealed and our pondering of it actually shapes us in the likeness of that thing that has been revealed.
This is the importance of, great theologians like Thomas Aquinas, for instance, Scott.
Or John Wesley, also was fond of humility.
But we'll talk about Thomas talks about even in the life to come, even in heaven, we never comprehend God. Mm-hmm. We possess a mind incapable of comprehending God fully. God we know in a particular way based on the type of creatures we are. And though our minds will be filled with God, we will never fully possess God as God is.
But that's true of every single relationship that exists. Not even just of God, but
Except one, the relationship God has to us.
Well, yes, right. God fully comprehends us.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. But I'm just saying, part of being human is to be in relationship that you do not fully comprehend. I mean, I know my wife Roberta, but do I fully comprehend her? No. But that doesn't mean that the relationship that isn't full and rich and transformative.
Yeah, and the curiosity that the many things I don't know or understand about my wife, when I am related to her the way I ought to be, those draw me toward her. Right, curious. Oh, I wonder what Ellen will do in this moment. Oh, how interesting!
That's what my husband thinks.
Like an
Oh, how
anthropologist.
interesting.
Roberta just usually thinks, "Oh, how annoying."
Yes,
I wonder what he'll do in this circumstance. Actually, I could predict that. And
she's
it's still
listening
annoying.
to this
Yeah.
right now. She's saying, "Oh, that's what he thinks about me. I could have figured that out."
But the very idea of orthodoxy is predicated on the idea that there are certain beliefs that lead us into life and certain beliefs that lead us into death.
That's right.
And in fact, in the early church, there was what was called two ways theology, as we find it one place is in the Didache, which is a late first, early second century. Scott and I debate.
Discipline.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay,
Baptismal.
I want to throw down on this just one real quick thing. The thing that's super interesting about the Didache
Yes.
is that there is not a single reference to Paul in the entire thing, as though the letters of Paul are not even known. I just think it's interesting.
That is interesting.
I know. Anyway, this
We
is
should
why
do a
I
whole
think it's
podcast
earlier.
on that.
Yeah, we should do a whole podcast. But in any case, it's an early
I'm
church
going to forget
discipline.
to show up to that.
So
That can
the
be cut
two
out,
ways. So back to two ways theology. The idea is, as it starts out, there are two ways: a way of life and a way of death, and there is a great difference between the two ways. Now, whether we think, just simply saying there are two ways is maybe oversimplifying things a bit, the idea behind it is that there are ways of thinking, speaking, and acting that lead us into life. And there are ways of thinking, speaking, and acting that lead us into death. And what Orthodoxy says is these are the ways that the church has discerned through its corporate wisdom over the years that lead us into life. And so doctrine becomes a way of applying the medicine of the Holy Spirit to our sin-sick souls. I made an analogy in Circuit Rider one time that, what if you were really sick and you went to the doctor and the doctor said, I got good news and bad news. Okay, well, give me the bad news first, doc. All right, the bad news is you're going to die. Okay, and you go, wow, that is bad news. All right, what's the good news? And the good news is, oh, well, there's a cure. And you go, oh, awesome. Well, give me the cure. And he says, well, if I gave you the cure, I would really be impinging on your personhood and individual freedom. And I don't think I should do that. So what I'm going to give you instead is, here's a stack of medical books, and I want you to figure out the cure yourself. And you will be so much more satisfied if this disease doesn't kill you first. And that, I think, is what we do when we fail to teach doctrine in the church. We say we have the medicine of the Holy Spirit, and we're not going to administer this medicine of the Holy Spirit because we've adopted some sort of modernist notion of what autonomy and personhood should involve.
It's progress, David.
I forgot about that. Yeah. But to do that is actually, it's not a kindness, it's actually cruelty. And I think, over time in the United Methodist Church, we've kind of begun to see that that the pluralistic idea of Methodism with which we first began was not what we should have done to start out with.
I think there's a problem in our tradition, which is, so like all mainline, it shows up when I teach theology. So I teach theology at United from time to time, every spring usually. And the way most mainline seminaries will teach theology, it builds toward this climactic moment where you declare your beliefs, the credo assignment, right? And if you go to any mainline seminary, this is a standard assignment. I believe. And I'm always so puzzled by this fact that we think the culmination of a seminary training is to declare what it is that makes you your distinctive set of beliefs. When the word credo is meant to be spoken corporately as a body to confess in the Nicene Creed, for instance. Credo is the first word of a creed, and you say that in unison with everyone else standing before the altar directed towards God. If that doesn't bespeak pluralism in the loins of the tradition, then I don't know what does.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's not that it's not there's a balance between this right relationship is a personal relationship. There's a reason why credo is in the first person, right? It's not we, it's I.
Right.
And yet it is said corporately in this posture. I mean, orthodoxy, we think orthodoxy means here's all the rules of thinking that you have to follow.
Right.
Orthodoxy is about right glory or right worship. It's the posture of a human being before the God who has revealed himself that makes relationship actually possible. And that orthodoxy, that right worship is first and foremost the relationship with the God who's revealed himself, which is articulated by the community as to who this is. We're actually, being transformed by.
I think, David, you have to go.
Yeah, but before I do, I want to get hot takes. Okay, who's more awesome, Aquinas or Wesley? Hot take, Justus.
Aquinas.
Okay, Scott.
Wesley.
Jeremiah.
Wesley.
Okay, I'm going to go with Wesley. Maggie.
Yeah, Aquinas. Like it's
Wow.
not a question.
You got a majority Wesley table. This is bizarre.
Good job, Jeremiah.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
Thanks for going with us.
The reason I chose it is because while I do,
Because Scott's feeding you tonight.
And housing him.
All right, let him speak.
I appreciate with Aquinas specifically the proofs of God that he put together. I think part of the problem was my understanding is that he believed the human mind was not fallen, and that as a result, scholasticism, there were many good things in scholasticism, but it also brought a lot of the evils that came about through the Enlightenment. Not that
Poor Justus over here is going to
not that Aquinas was a part of the Enlightenment by any stretch, but that some of the groundbreaking work he started led to some of those things.
And that's why Wesley is more awesome than Aquinas.
I mean, how old are you, Jeremiah?
I'm 24.
We'll let you win. Because you're 24, and that's pretty good.
And because you advance an actual argument instead of just giving a hot take. Yeah.
So you get to win.
Yeah. I'm appreciative of Aquinas.
I know you
Oh,
are.
don't
I know you are.
condescend.
It's okay.
I'm
Look, not all of us can have cultivated proper judgment.
by the time we're 50. Right. Is that what you're trying to say?
Oh, you're calling age? Okay, all right. That's all right.
No, I meant you were insulting me that I hadn't cultivated proper
Well, that's
judgment
right,
by
that's
the age
right.
of 50.
That's what he was
right.
doing. Let's
I
just
was
clarify.
insulting you,
Yeah,
just to be
I
clear.
thought so. I was clear on that, actually.
Oh, all
I
right.
expect the same. Yeah, hot takes. I don't know what a hot take is, so
Well, you
And that
gave
just-
a hot take.
you-
Thomas.
A hot take is just a quick opinion.
yeah.
Oh,
Right.
St. Thomas
is that similar to a hot pocket? That's right.
Hot pockets are disgusting.
I love them.
Oh, God, that's not surprising. All right.
So will this go down as the worst podcast in the history of Plain Truth?
Nope.
We just skirted over the edge. We just barely.
Cleared the fence post. Yes.
I had one more thing to say regarding why it matters what we believe. And we are called human beings as opposed to human doings. And I think that what we believe influences so heavily what we do, and in turn, what we do also so heavily influences who we are. And I think what matters to God is both what we do and ultimately who we are, and what we believe is so closely intertwined with what we do. I think that's why it matters what we believe.
I think you should let Jeremiah be the host of the podcast.
Well, actually, when you become a dean, you are, in fact, a human doing. You're not a human being anymore.
Avoid academia. Cost. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for being with us today. That has been our podcast, and special thanks to Dr. Justus Hunter and Jeremiah, who really said basically two of the most profound things here. We should have let you talk a lot more.
One. Let's just be clear. One of them was not profound.
You could have interrupted more. That's been our podcast today. Thanks for listening. Give us a follow on Twitter at Holy Spirit Pod and tweet at us any ideas you have for podcasts or just to say hi. Rate us on iTunes because it helps other people find the podcast, and follow us on Facebook. We really appreciate you guys listening, and we'll come back to you next time. Bye.
Bye.